Hello, hello, and welcome back. Happy Memorial Day. And I just want to take a moment to thank all of those past and present that have served. But I know on this Memorial Day here in the United States, we're specifically honoring those who have lost their lives in service. And so I just want to say thank you to, again, past and present individuals who have served, but also those who have passed on and that we still celebrate and we still honor. So just wanted to share that before we get going. But today is really, it's been a long time coming episode. I feel I was laying in bed last night thinking about this topic, and I was like, oh my gosh, we need to do this. I can't believe we haven't done this topic yet. And I actually didn't want to get out of bed. I was too tired, and um, I told Jeremy, I was like, can you text me this little snippet of what I'm going to tell you? And so he wrote it down in a text and sent it to me because it was this episode, and it jogged my memory to spark my intrigue into putting this episode together for you for today. So yeah, like I said, I can't believe we haven't done this yet, but here we are. We're doing it. So this episode is going to dive into both what is a food allergen, what is a food sensitivity / intolerance, right? What's the difference between those two? We're also going to break down what those look like, right? And then we're also, most importantly, going to talk about how we can, diagnose these, how we can find out if we have food allergen or food sensitivity. But then even more importantly, on top of that, we're going to talk about, which is in the headline, is in the title of this episode, why might we be experiencing more of these things, right? Why might we be either having ourselves more food allergies or more food sensitivities, or just in general in the world and society? Why are we seeing more of this? Why is it becoming more prevalent? So we got a lot to tackle, but we're going to get to it all. So let's dive in right now. So before we dive into the difference between a food allergy versus a food sensitivity / intolerance, I want to tell you these staggering statistics that are from the United States related to food allergies and food sensitivities. So there are approximately 26 million Americans that suffer from a food allergy, and approximately 65 million Americans that suffer from food sensitivities. I am one of those that suffers from food sensitivities, and I wouldn't be surprised if you also are. I just raised my hand on Zoom as I'm recording this for those of you watching on YouTube, but I wouldn't be surprised if you are also either in your head raising your hand or as you're listening raising your hand too, just acknowledging that, yeah, I'm right there with you, Kelly, right? So it's very common, unfortunately, these days, and we're going to talk about why that could be here in just a little bit. But I want to dive into what the difference is between a food allergy and a food sensitivity. So a food allergy is going to be something that it's food that causes severe symptoms, okay? And it could be that you just touch the food. It could be that you ate the food on accident, and like I said, it could be the smallest amount, but it can cause really drastic, really devastating symptoms to occur. So things like anaphylaxis, so closing of your throat that you can't breathe, right? Coughing, wheezing, itching, stuffy, runny nose, watery or puffy eyes. And a lot of or I should say the most common foods that we see people having food allergies to are things like eggs, milk, nuts, fish and shellfish. And so those can cause really, really awful, right? Really, really awful effects on the body, which is why, if you're a teacher like me, you always check your list to make sure at the beginning of the school year to see, like, okay, what allergies do we have, right? Because it's very, it's something that we have to take seriously, right? And if you have a child or you yourself have an allergy, or someone in your family or a friend, how serious it can be. I mean, this can really, sometimes people need EpiPens to get them out out of the symptoms, right? To help them recover, if they can't get, immediately seen by a doctor, or they can't, get rushed to the hospital fast enough, because it can be, life altering, life changing, in terms of, you could sometimes can get so serious that people, potentially could lose their life if it's that serious. So it's not something to take lightly. But on the flip side, so, food allergies, this really intense thing, right? Food sensitivities, while they don't have really great outcomes in terms of the symptoms, they're not life-threatening, okay? They're things that we're going to experience, but we can live with to an extent. It's not going to kill us, right? So food sensitivities have a delayed response, which is why, like for myself, if I were to have something that has gluten, because I have a gluten intolerance or a gluten sensitivity, I don't experience that right away. Like when let's say I have a slice of pizza that is not gluten-free, it's not like I'm eating it and thinking, oh, I can taste the gluten. Like, yep, it's not making me feel good. No, it definitely doesn't happen that fast. It doesn't act that quickly. It takes, it could take a couple hours up to even, a day or two, depending on, just how your body is processing and where your body's at in terms of its health state. And so the symptoms that you experience are predominantly digestive related, but they're not all. So some of the symptoms that you might experience with a food sensitivity or intolerance are things like flatulence, like gas, right? Bloating, diarrhea, constipation. You might feel some stomach pain, some like stomach cramping. In addition, you might experience things in terms of your skin. So acne, rosacea, eczema, psoriasis. You might also experience weight fluctuation, weight gain, right? Water retention, decreased energy and lethargy. So you're just feeling really fatigued, right? And it's important to mention that these food sensitivities, this food intolerance doesn't just happen overnight. You don't just wake up and, voila, you have a gluten sensitivity, right? It happens over time. It's the more you're exposed to that and your body's unable to handle it, the more you start to notice it, right? And so I want to go back to allergies again, because I want to talk a little bit about just the prevalence of it, the frequency of it. So in the past about 3 decades, but the past 30 years, so essentially when I was born, roughly the time that I was born, back in 1990, we have increased in the frequency of food allergies being diagnosed, which I don't think is a surprise to most. At least it wasn't to me when I, found this research. And it's particularly in industrialized societies. So that to me also makes total sense because, the United States is an industrialized society, and we have so many toxins that we're exposed to, not only in the environment, but also in the packaged processed foods that we either acquire or have from time to time, or, just are exposed to, right? But I also wanted to mention that when it comes to allergies, the allergies are caused by the immune system fighting substances in the environment. And so it should see this food as harmless, but because our immune systems are weakened from all the toxins, all the exposure that we get from society, sometimes some of our bodies are more susceptible or more prone to these developing these allergies, because our immune system becomes weakened, and it starts to look at these foods as these foreign invaders, right? That are trying to attack the immune system, even though they're not, but that's what our body thinks. And so then on the flip side, now we're going back again, we're going to go back and forth for a little bit here, like ping pong. But on the flip side, again, with sensitivities, food sensitivities and intolerances, those occur because there is some sort of an absence of a digestive enzyme that's going to help with that particular food or that particular nutrient that's in that food. So for example, people who are lactose intolerant, they typically lack the lactase enzyme, which means they're unable to properly process lactose, which we often find in milk products, right? When we think about FODMAPs, right, those have these fermentable sugars in them. So people on low FODMAP diets are eating foods that are low in these fermentable sugars, right? And for those people who are doing that, they're doing it mostly because they lack the digestive enzymes in that respect to process those fermentable sugars. So typically they need amylase, glucosamase. Oh, that's a tongueful. So let's go back. There are several that we need, and that people who can't properly process FODMAPs need. And they don't. So if they are on a low FODMAP diet, it's probably because they are low in these enzymes. So let me try again, because that was a mouthful. So they're typically going to be low in amylase, which is a digestive enzyme, glucosamylase, cellulase, lactase, and invertase. And these are all needed to help break down the fermentable sugars that are in FODMAP foods. And the FODMAP letters stand for different fermentable sugars. So I'm not going to go into those because I will definitely butcher those right now. But those fermentable sugars end up in the digestive tract. They end up not being able to be processed effectively. And then that causes an imbalance in the gut bacteria. And then can cause a whole host of issues, which is, again, why some people will, for a time, it's not good to be on a low FODMAP diet for forever. I usually recommend that for no more than 2 to 3 months, and then get off of it and start to reincorporate some foods that are not low FODMAP and see how you do with that. So that's always what I recommend. But again, I'm not here to diagnose or treat or anything, so you know that. Another intolerance, I'm just going to go through a couple more intolerances that you might not have known, but I think they're good to note. Another intolerance is a sucrose intolerance. That is also a type of sugar. And genetic sucrase isomaltase is an enzyme deficiency that people can have. It's diagnosable, and it causes sucrose, which is sugar, and starch, so grains, to be specific, to not be properly metabolized. So if you have a sucrose intolerance, it's going to be because you lack this enzyme, and the sucrose intolerance is typically genetic. So meaning, it's usually passed down, but not always. It's definitely a genetic condition. So it's much more likely that it could be passed down, through generations. And then fructose intolerance. So that's also sugar, right? We find fructose in most of our fruits. It's called the ALDOB gene. So it's ALDOB gene, and that can cause a hereditary fructose intolerance if you have that. And this makes this, if you don't have, or if you have this gene, then you lack adequate amounts of this aldolase B enzyme, which is needed to break down fructose, which is found in most sugars, which is found in most fruits. I am all over the place today. So yeah, that's another one, right? So sucrose intolerance, fructose intolerance, both sugar intolerances. And then sulfite sensitivity is a deficiency in sulfite oxidase enzyme, and that breaks down the sulfites in foods, which are things like dried apricots, canned fruits, wine, and cereals. Again, there are more than what I'm sharing with you right now. There are more intolerances, but these are just some of the most common that I wanted to share with you. I actually was tested for a sucrose intolerance and was found negative. But that is something that you can test for, and we'll talk about how you can do that here in a moment. So again, some of the most common intolerances are going to be the lactose intolerant, sucrose intolerance, fructose intolerance, sulfite sensitivity, and then FODMAP intolerance or sensitivity. And so if you want to test for an allergy, so now we're going back to testing and thinking about allergies. If you want to test for allergies, you would typically go to an allergist office, and they will place the allergens, typically either on your back or maybe your arm, and they will then scratch your skin to allow that allergen to seep in underneath your skin to see if it triggers a reaction. I actually just did this. I had allergy testing done because I wanted to make sure I wasn't allergic to some particular foods. And that was recommended by my gastroenterologist. And it turns out I am not allergic to any foods, so that's good. But that is something that you can definitely do. And I would encourage you to do that, especially if you suspect maybe that you do have an intolerance, or I'm sorry, that you do have an allergy to some foods. And then the other thing I wanted to share is how you can check for food intolerances. So there's actually 3 main ways that you could do that. One would be the hydrogen breath test. So if you have an increased amount of hydrogen on this test, that is going to tell you that you're improperly breaking down specifically sugars, is what this one's looking for. And the hydrogen breath test is really you just blowing into, it's usually like little glass vials, and I think it's two hours. I've done it 2 or 3 times now, so I should know. But you blow in every 15 minutes, you blow into a tube, and then those get shipped off to a lab, and they check to see what your levels of hydrogen are. And so basically, if your hydrogen levels are elevated, it tells us that you are not breaking down sugars properly. So the 2 other ways that you can test for food sensitivities or intolerances would be to do an elimination diet and then track using like a food diary, which I've also done. And then you can also do a blood, hair, or mouth swab test, which I've also done. I have not done the hair or blood, but I have done, I have not done the hair or mouth swab, but I have done the blood test to check for food sensitivities. I don't personally feel like it's 100% accurate. But again, if you want something if you're not using it to like totally commit yourself to like saying, oh my God, I have this intolerance, and you're just doing it just to see, kind of big picture, like see what it comes up with, then I'd say go for it. But if you're like, I am going to this is going to be like the Bible to me, whatever it says, I'm going to cut out, then I would strongly discourage you from doing it, because it can be misleading and not always accurate. So that's just my 2 cents on that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is what you probably tuned into this episode for, so I'm saving the best for last, which is like, why on earth are we experiencing more of this, right? And I kind of alluded to some of it at the beginning of this episode, but it's environmental factors, right? That's one of them. So our environment, specifically here in the United States, where we're very industrialized, our environment has so many toxins that our bodies just, our bodies can't handle all of that, right? And so our bodies are breaking down inside because they're trying to fend off, to fight off, to ward off all of the constant exposure that we are inundated with on a daily basis, whether we realize it or not. And over time, the body can get tired of doing that and can become weaker from doing that. And so we become more susceptible to food intolerances and food sensitivities, as well as we may develop a food allergy. Now, typically those are, you don't see a food allergy, usually happening later in life. Usually it's early on, early adolescence that you are made aware of that. But that doesn't mean that it can't always happen, in a different way. We're at a later point in time. Another reason that we might be seeing allergy and sensitivity to foods, constantly becoming on the rise is our hygiene over time has improved. And you might be like, well, wouldn't that be a good thing? I mean, it is, right? It's good that we are prioritizing that as human beings. But with that means that we are experiencing, less infections than, previous generations, previous, centuries did, right? And so because of that, we're experiencing less, like parasitic infections, which can lead our immune system to start trying to fight off things that are not harmful, like we talked about earlier, because it has less to fight off, and it thinks that, oh, maybe this thing that you're eating is a foreign invader, and it just doesn't know because it's been weakened, again, going back to the environmental factors, because it's been beaten down over time by the toxins and the constant exposure that we give it each and every day, even though, it may not be intentional, right? It's just, we can't get away from every single toxin in our world, in our daily life. It's unavoidable. And then another reason why we could also be experiencing more of these issues is most of us are not getting enough vitamin D. And by that, I mean, we're not getting out in the sun as much, right? There are actually some places in the world that like rarely ever see the sun, right? And so that's not good, right? Because we know that vitamin D actually helps to support the immune system. So if we want to be building up our immune system and making it better, we need to be doing things that are going to support it. And one of those things is making sure we're getting sun exposure. But if you can't, making sure that you're supplementing with vitamin D, right? And you also want to make sure that you are supplementing vitamin D with a vitamin D that either includes K2 or that has or that you buy a K2 supplement, because that will help you to better absorb vitamin D. So just a little side thing there for you in case you didn't know that, because I didn't know that for the longest time. And then again, my newest gastroenterologist shared that with me, and I was like, holy cow. I mean, as a nutritionist, I didn't even realize how much of a benefit that could be. So I have since then started to incorporate K2 with my vitamin D supplement. So yeah, just want to share that little tidbit with you too. So that is the end of our episode today. I just want to let you know that this upcoming month, June, I can't believe that it's almost June, we are going to have a sweet friend, Ashley Sitterding, coming in to do an EFT tapping session with our amazing podcast community in the Facebook group. So that will be June 6th, which is a Tuesday, and it will be at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So she'll be live in the Facebook group with us. That will be the day after her episode with me releases. The episode has a little snippet, a very short EFT tapping session within it. She does it with me and leads me through it, which is incredible. So you definitely want to check that out when it releases on the 5th. And I actually met Ashley when I was speaking in Fresno, California back in February. And she is just this amazing human, as are all the incredible humans that I've met over the past several years. And so I just can't wait to share her with you. And I can't wait for you to connect with her. So stay tuned for that. We've got 2 times a week the dance infused workout sessions going on in the podcast Facebook community, Wellness Wednesday chats, and who knows what else to come in there. So stay tuned. There will be in June, the beginning of June, June 1st, there will be a calendar in the Facebook community, so you have access to all of the dates and times of things that are up and coming, and I will continuously update that if there are any new additions to the calendar for June. So if you are not in the podcast Facebook community, I highly suggest that you come over and join us there. The link is in the show notes, and then also come check us out on YouTube, because you can see me waving to you right now, and just so super happy that I get to do this for a living, and to share with you what lights me up, what has helped me to support my own health and wellness. And so I want to give that back to you too. So thank you again so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day if you are listening on the day that this releases, and a wonderful week ahead. And we will chat later.